The entire Jewish nation gathered at the foot of Har Sinai, and they heard as a people, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. They heard Hashem speak. They all reached a level of nevuah. They saw things, recognized things that no other generation had, and they reached the highest level that human beings can. Moshe Rabbeinu finished the rest of the Seres Dibros. He then told them to prepare. Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shemayim to receive the rest of the Torah. At a certain point, there was some confusion. The 40 days that Moshe Rabbeinu had gone up for were apparently over. Vayar Am ki boshes Moshe laredis. Moshe wasn't coming down. There was some mistake, and the nation, or at least part of the nation, gathered to form a form of Avodah Zarah. They approached Aaron. Aaron recognized the danger. Aaron, to push them off, allowed it to look like he was participating, and in fact, on some level, they had served the Avodah Zarah. Hashem says to Moshe, raid, go down. Ki shiches amcha. However you understand what they did, there was some level of Avodah Zarah. Shiches amcha, they destroyed what they were supposed to be doing. And then Hashem says to Moshe, it is really up to you. Hanicha li. The pasuk says a very unusual thing. Hashem says, let me go, vayichar api bahem, and I'll destroy them. They're not the people I wanted. They're not worthy of being the chosen nation. Let me go, says Hashem, and I'll destroy them. And Rashi explains that Hashem was telling Moshe a very clear message. It is in your control. If you'll let me go, according to Din, they're right to be destroyed. I'll rebuild from you alone. But it's up to you, Moshe. And Hashem was giving Moshe the control of that issue. If you daven, if you beseech, you can change their decree. And in fact, Moshe Rabbeinu davened, he implored, he begged Hashem, and Hashem allowed that to pass. Moshe Rabbeinu comes down, he breaks the luchos. Very shortly thereafter, there's a killing of the people, 3,000 of the people who actually served the Avodah Zarah. And then Moshe Rabbeinu says, let me go back up. Let me see if I could appease Hashem. Let me see if I could be mechaper on the damage that you did. And then the pasuk says that Hashem allowed Moshe to return. Vayeshev Moshe Hashem. Moshe returned to Hashem. Vayomer ana chata amazeh chata gedola. This nation has sinned a great sin. Vayasam elkei zav. They made gods of gold. Vata tisas chatasam Hashem. If you'll forgive them. V'ma'ayin, if you don't forgive them, macheni namasifrecha, erase me from your book. And that would be a very impassioned speech, a very pure manhig begging for his nation's survival, if it weren't for the way Rashi explains to us what in fact Moshe Rabbeinu was saying. Moshe Rabbeinu said, Elokei Zav, they made gods of gold. Atu shegaramta lehem. Hashem, you're the cause. You're the reason why they served the Avodah Zarah. Sheshbatam zav v'chol chevsam. You gave them gold and everything they desired. Mayasu shalayechtu. How's it possible that they wouldn't sin? And then Rashi goes on to explain exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying to Hashem. Moshel l'melech. I'll give you a moshel. It's like a king. Shaya machel mashkes beno. He fed his son. He gave him to drink. Makashto got his son all dolled up, all dressed up. V'tola kis b'savara, put a purse of gold coins on around his neck. Mamido b'pesach bezonos, and then the king leaves his son on the house, the opening, the Pesach to the house of your repute. Mayaseh ben shalayechta. How is it possible that the young boy, the young lad, won't sin? Ata garamta. Moshe Rabbeinu says to Hashem, you caused it. And apparently, these words were very powerful. Because the Gemara says, not only did Hashem get angry at Moshe for these words, Gemara Brachas tells us, Shechaza Kadosh Baruch Hu v'hodel Moshe. Hashem admitted to Moshe, you're correct. I gave them too much gold. I am the cause. And apparently this was the opening that allowed Hashem to forgive the Jewish nation. And this is a fascinating Rashi and a wonderful example of the courage, the dynamic energy of a Manig B'Yisrael, but it begs a number of questions. The first one is that it's very clear that Moshe is saying to Hashem, you caused it because you gave them so much gold. The Jewish people left Mitzrayim with all of the wealth. All the wealth of Mitzrayim they despoiled. They walked out with the gold, the silver, all of the wealth. And that's the cause That's the reason why they came to serve Avodah Zarah. Now let's ask a number of questions. Number one, this is the Dor Deah. They had just seen Hashem 40 days earlier. They had just seen the greatest revelation that any generation had. They recognized Hashem as the creator, as the manhig, stripped away of all of the confusion, stripped away of all of the haziness that we suffer from. We might be tempted. Gold to us is glittery. It's glamorous. But this nation just heard Hashem. They saw Hashem. But more than that, what would they do with their gold? They're in the midbar. They're in the desert. There's no one to hire, no one to buy things from. Maybe at the edge of the midbar there's some commerce to be done, but they're not involved in livelihood. This is the Kolel generation. For the next 40 years they're going to be in the midbar. But at that moment, how could money tempt them? And if that problem doesn't bother you, let's ask the question a little bit more. The mashal that Rashi says is a very powerful mashal. And the only way I could explain it is because I was a high school rebbe for many years. And I'll give you an observation. Many years ago, let's say 10 years ago, the great challenge to the high school dorm counselor was when Sports Illustrated came out with the swimsuit edition. Now, Sports Illustrated is a magazine of sports, basketball players, football players, whatever it may be. And once a year, they decided to fall off the edge of insanity. And they would have a swimsuit issue where they'd show the latest women in the latest swimsuits. And obviously, the goal of the high school dorm council was to keep that magazine out of the dorm because it would be damaging to the chevra. Okay, now that was a different generation. That's not the challenges of today's high school dorm counselor. The challenges are very, very different. But the reality is that if your child has an iPhone, it is guaranteed it's going to come with a cost. If you have no choice, you have no choice. If all the friends have iPhones, what are you going to do? But l'chol ha'pachos, make sure that tag filters the phone. Why? Because if your child is running around with an iPhone without a filter put on by a professional, it's not a question if they will be damaged. It's guaranteed. They will see many things involved in many, many things that you would, in a million years, not dream about. And the only thing that so amazes me is that parents on a regular basis do this. And the question is, how could they be so foolish? How could a parent give a child an iPhone without a filter? Even with a filter, it's not so simple. But if you have no choice, how could you give without a filter? And the answer is simple. They forgot what it's like to be an adolescent. Women maybe never knew, but men forgot what it's like to be a 15-year-old with driving passions, with a hunger, with a need, with a natural curiosity, and the sense that this is a new generation, and let me just discover. And I guarantee if your child has an iPhone without a filter put on by a professional, it's only a question of when they will be on pornographic sites, when they will see things that are disastrous, damaging, shouldn't be seen by any sane human being. But you see, that's because there is a very real powerful drive. And a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old, 17-year-old boy has a very powerful drive, and unless he really controls himself, unless he's sheltered and protected, he's going to end up in a very bad way. But listen to the mashal that Rashi is saying. The king takes his son, feeds him, clothes him, bathes him, puts him on the doorstep of the house of repute, that Pesach Beis with a chain with gold coins on it, Mayaseh ben Velechta. Isn't it obvious that the son is going to sin? Here's the question. We're dealing with the Dor Deah. Okay, Hashem gave them too much money. They had too much wealth. But that puts them in such a dangerous plight that they're going to literally, it's a guarantee that they're going to serve Avodah Zarah. Number one, again, the Dor Deah, this generation should not be tempted by money. And number two, how does it lead to Avodah Zarah? And how is it such a powerful pull that is considered like taking an adolescent and putting him on the doorstep of the house of ill repute? And I'd like to see if we can understand what in fact this Rashi is sharing with us. And to do that, let's begin with an observation in general about money. I was once not feeling so well, and someone says to me, "Hey, you look like $1 million." I said, "I do?" He said, "Yeah, all green and crumply. Okay, cute joke, but here's the point. If you think about it, money is green and crumply. Yet if you were to ever hold a $100,000 bill in your hand, no matter how green, no matter how crumply, your blood pressure would rise. And it's a very strange thing that money has such an allure. But the Chovos HaLevavos explains to us it's not by accident. He explains one of the irrational passions that Hashem put into the human race is a love of gold. And he explains quite simply why. For commerce to exist, for an economy to exist, there needs to be a system of value. You see, if there is no system of value, then it's going to be barter. Okay, I have 2 cows and you have a pair of shoes, and my neighbor has a table and I need wood and he's going to... It's not only cumbersome, you can't possibly trade when there's no system of value, because I have too many cows, you have too many shoes, he has too many tables, we all have things we need, but there's no convenient way, there's no way of exchange. Hashem put in an irrational love of gold in the heart of man so that now there'll be a central value system, something that everyone considers valuable, everyone covets, and now we have a system to use to barter against. We say a bar of gold has X amount of value, it's worth 20 cows, 16 tables, whatever the value system is, and now we have a value system via which we can trade, via which economies can exist, via which trade can happen. But this love of gold is again irrational. It's not something that man sat down and said, I think it's a good thing. And more than that, gold itself isn't much. What is gold? It's soft. You can't eat it. You can't use it for clothing. You can't really, if you try to make a plow out of it, it won't do a very good job as an axe or as a field implement. And if you think about it, there's no reason in the world why anyone should desire gold. Yet there's an innate drive for gold, a fever for gold, a lust for gold. Why? Because again, that's one of the great miracles of the way Hashem runs the world, so that there should be economies, so that there should be things happening. But you have to recognize that love of gold is very real and very powerful. And it's something that's innate to the human being. It's something that's very natural. And on one level, that could help us understand that even the Dordea, even if they had nothing to do with their money, even if they weren't going to be involved in stocks and bonds and trading, had a tremendous sense of wealth. And in that sense, even though they saw Hashem clearly, and even though they knew the value of every mitzvah, they knew the damage of every avera, money still had an allure, money still had a pull, and we could understand, at least on one level, how even though they were in the highest madrega, money still mattered. But again, that's not going to help us understand how it leads to Avodah Zarah. It's not going to explain to us how money, wealth, riches is going to lead this generation to give it all up. And to understand this part, we have to understand some of the effects of wealth. And to do this, let me share with you that there are 3 cultural beliefs about money. There are 3 beliefs that seem to be not just cultural in the sense that it's our culture, but it seems to be almost universal, and it seems to be throughout the millennium. So let's begin with the first cultural myth. The first cultural myth that seems to be very widely accepted, especially today, is more money equals more happiness. As in, if I only had some money, I mean a lot of money. If I had a lot of money, I'd be very, very happy. If I had even more money, I'd be even happier. And if I were really, really rich, if I was as rich as Jeff Bezos, I'd be so happy. Because more money equals more happiness. Now let's see if this cultural belief has any validity. Now, how do you test? Normally people are wealthy for many years, or they're born wealthy. So how do you find out? So there happens to be a very interesting reality, that there is a way to test this theory. Does more money equal more happiness? There was a study done about lottery winners, but I mean major lottery winners. These are people who had won over $100 million, a life-changing amount of money, and sociologists were studying them to see the effects on their lifestyle, to see the effect that it would happen to them. Now you have to imagine winning $100 million or more, or $200 million or $300 million is in fact a major life-changing event. as in it changes your life in just about every imaginable way. And here's what they found. 80% of major lottery winners were back at work, typically at the same job that they had been at before they won. Now here's the strangest part. Here we have Joe, the UPS driver. Joe's wearing brown socks, brown shorts, brown pants, brown shirt every day of his life, picking packages up, dropping packages off, and every day Joe is cussing his life. Oh, drat, if I could just win. If I could win big, I'd be out of here. You'd never see me in brown again. You'd never see me driving a truck again. Day after day, he says this. Day after day, he buys his ticket, and one day he wins. $200 million. Whoa, Joe struck it rich. So what does he do? He goes out and does everything imaginable. Buys up boats in every color of the rainbow. Buys himself a jet ski. Buys himself a new Maserati. Goes off to the Alps. Then goes to Panama. And after about a year, he finds himself bored. And he finds himself back at work. And 80% of major lottery winners don't find that those huge sums of money change their life. Quite the opposite. They end up back at the same job that they have been doing. But here's another study of lottery winners that's even more interesting. They took two groups of people who had an event that literally should change their life. And one group of people were, again, major lottery winners. The other group of people were people who became paraplegics within that year. And they studied the happiness level of both groups. Now, needless to say, the ones who had won the lottery were initially ecstatic. I mean, come on, just what I always dreamt about. And obviously the people who had lost the use of their limbs were pretty morbid, pretty depressed. But after about 1 year's time, what they found was the only significant difference in happiness was that the people who had become paraplegic within that year's time described taking more joy and enjoying their daily activities to a greater extent than did the lottery winners. Now, isn't that insane? Isn't there anything worse than losing the loss of your limbs? And isn't there anything better than money? Money, if I could have some money, wow! And a lot of money, by millions, hundreds of millions, it's great, wow! And oddly enough, it doesn't change a person's happiness. Oddly enough, you could win all the money and you're back at the same job. And you could say it again, anybody doesn't know how to buy happiness. They don't know where to spend. They don't know where to buy. And you could say the line and say the line. But once you begin studying people who make a fortune of money, what you begin realizing is that money doesn't buy happiness. And as much as you and I may say it, again, there's this cultural belief that not me, come on. If I had that money, I would be so happy. And that same person wins the lotto or strikes it big. His company takes off. He sells, it goes public. He sells and he makes a fortune of money. And lo and behold, he's no more happier than he was before. And that we'll call interesting myth number one, that more money equals more happiness. And it doesn't seem to be true. As a matter of fact, The Paradox of Choice is a book that describes some of the features of modern society. And one of the facts he discovers is that people are about as happy as the people around them, regardless of how much money they have. He points out that people in Poland are about as happy as the people in Japan, despite the fact that the people in Japan have 10 times the spendable wealth, discretionary income as people in Poland. He also describes that Poles are happier than Hungarians, even though they both have about the same amount of wealth. People in Iceland are much happier than people in America, even though they have about the same level of wealth. And here's the interesting observation that he reaches. Once a person leaves what we call poverty, and he's able to take care of his basic needs, more money does not equal more happiness. And the odd thing is, we could say it, we could discuss it, but it just doesn't seem to seep into our essence. And there's this cultural belief, more money equals more happiness. And the only reason why I'm not happy is I haven't made it yet. And sociologists study this phenomena, and they discover that really it doesn't seem to be true at all. And one of the most interesting things is that Richard Earlstein, who is an economic historian at the University of Southern California, when he studies the relationship between income and happiness, he discovered the following quirk of human nature. Everyone has a sense, if I had wealth, I'd be happy. Problem is, I'm not rich. But it doesn't matter what socioeconomic level they're at. A person could be wealthy, very wealthy, super wealthy, but there's always a sense if I had 20% more, 50%, that's rich. Me, I'm doing okay, but I'm not rich. Rich is, and all you got to do is point upwards. And when you point upwards, you discover what rich is. And then when you get to that higher level, you also have this sense of richer, richer, richer. And no one ever attains this elusive thing called happiness, because guess what? More money doesn't equal more happiness. But no matter how many times we say it, no matter how many times we think about it, it doesn't dwell into our consciousness, and we walk around with this illusionary myth that more money equals more happiness. And let's call that cultural myth number one. But that's not the only cultural myth, and that's not the most damaging one. There's another cultural myth that I find far more devastating. It was quite a number of years ago when I was filling out an application in a bank, and the bank representative asked me, "What is your net worth?" What is my net worth? Now, at the time, it struck me a little bit. What is my net worth? You mean, what am I worth? I don't know. What is a human being worth? If you wanted to buy me, let's say I want to sell myself. What would I sell myself for? $1 million, $10 million, $100 million? What do you buy? What is the worth of a human being? I don't know. So at the time, I wasn't really interested in making the point, but it did rub me the wrong way. So I said, "You mean my financial net worth?" And then I wrote down whatever I estimated to be my financial net worth. But this understanding that my self-worth is equal to my net worth is the second cultural myth that we all fall prey to. That who I am, how I view myself, is based on how much I'm worth. What is my financial net worth? I'm a rich man. I'm a very important man. I'm a poor man. I'm not an important man. I'm a little guy. I can barely buy, a hamburger. I'm a little person. And when your self-worth and your net worth are equated, it's a very, very sad situation to be in. But that seems to be a very real cultural myth. And I'd like to share with you something profound. The Chovos shares with us. Hashem grants wealth for one of three reasons. And the way a person uses the wealth, you can tell exactly why Hashem granted that person wealth. When a person has wealth, and I mean real wealth, it could be either a bracha, it could be an asayan, or it could be a klala, it could be a curse. And again, as the Chovos explains, you could watch how the person uses the money and immediately know which category it fits into. If you find a person who's granted wealth, and then he turns his attention to important things in life, he learns more, he davens more, he gives tzedakah, he focuses on what he can do to help the Klal Yisrael, what he can do to help others. You see a person turning his attention to why he was created. You're looking at a man who is blessed. The wealth is a bracha. He was granted this bracha so he can grow, he can accomplish. That is a bracha because it allows him to focus on why Hashem created him, allows him to grow, allows him to become a holier, greater person, allows him to accomplish the mission he was put on this earth for. If a person is granted great wealth and he turns his attention towards Hashem, that's a bracha. If a person is granted great wealth and you find him preoccupied, busy, how am I going to keep my wealth? How am I going to make more money? How am I going to keep my company going? What am I going to do with the next ups and downs of the stock market? You see a person who's absorbed, you're looking at a man who is granted wealth as an assignment, as a test. And money is a major test. Because when you have money, and a lot of money, suddenly there are many issues you have to think about. So suddenly you're preoccupied. No longer do you have the time to learn. No longer is it so easy to daven. No longer is it so easy to be dedicated to others. And you're looking at a man who's put into a life test. One of the most difficult life tests that a person could ever be subjective to is ashirus. But there's a third reason why Hashem might grant a person wealth. And that could be a curse. That could be a klala. If you see a person who starts dining in the finest restaurants, starts driving the finest cars, starts going on vacations and cruises, another house, another car, another prestigious thing he purchases, you're looking at a man who's eating his olam haba in this world. Because if he doesn't turn more towards his creator, and he doesn't even fight the fight, but he becomes enveloped in the busyness and materialism, what you're looking at is a man who's squandering his existence. You're looking at a cursed man. Hashem sometimes will grant a person wealth. Why? Because that person did whatever he did, doesn't deserve to become a great human being. And Hashem gives him this wealth as a way of buying him off, as if to say, I don't want him in the world to come with me. Let him earn his world to come here. Let him eat it up here. And when you see a person who's preoccupied with the thickness of his carpet, the beauty of his home, how fancy his cars are, how luxurious his suits, ties, and watches are, you're looking at a man who's eating up his world to come in his world. Great wealth isn't always a bracha. It isn't always a test, and it isn't always a klala. It is a situation. If you use it properly, it's the greatest bracha because it allows you to serve Hashem, allows you to do what you're supposed to, you grow, you accomplish, and you use those monies as you should. In that case, it's a bracha. If you become preoccupied, just involved more and more in it, well, guess what? It's just like any other life test. But if you become so involved in materialism, then it is a curse because what you're doing is you're wasting your time, wasting your moment, and you're not even realizing what you're being involved in. But if you'd like to understand the real danger of money, it's neither as a test nor as a curse. It's when I become a rich man. You see, I'm a little different than you. For you, it's okay to fly cattle car class on El Al. For me, business class really isn't good enough. And not just that, for me, the idea of even waiting at the airport really isn't proper. I should have my own jet, and I really shouldn't even, have to wait at all. Because, to be honest with you, I'm a little bit different than you. I don't want to say I'm much above you, but I mean, I am. I'm a rich man. I have a lot of money. I have so much money I can buy and sell you and your family and the block, and I'm different than you. I am a rich man. And as we discussed in one of the earlier Shmuz in the Parshas, when a person becomes wealthy and then he starts attributing that wealth to him and he starts taking credit for the attribute, I'm a rich man, and suddenly I'm a very different person than you. You see, but when I'm a rich man, I am suddenly independent. I don't need anybody. I don't need my kids. I don't need my wife. I don't need God. I can buy and sell the world. And that sense of independence, that sense of I don't need anyone, the sense that I am powerful is the most damaging force a person can be afflicted with. Why? Because the essence of Avodas Hashem is one relationship. The Chovas of Avos explains to us a truism in life. An Eved has an Adon has an Eved. By definition, to be a master, you have to have a servant. You can't be a master without a servant. And by definition, if you're a servant, you have to have a master. You can't be a servant without a master. That relationship is a truism. A master has a servant has a master. And explains the Chovas of Avos the essence of our Avodas Hashem. The essence of everything that we're put on this earth to do is to recognize that I am the creation and Hashem is my creator. I am the servant, Hashem is the master. And that relationship is predicated on this one understanding. I am a servant of my master. And that relationship is everything, and it's perfect until I get a little money. This idea of servant, I'm not so comfortable with that whole idea. After all, a pretty important person like me, an independent person like me, who doesn't need anyone, who doesn't like that sense of depending and serving, I'm not so comfortable with this whole God thing. And all of a sudden, I start inflating and inflating. No longer am I a servant to my master. No longer am I subservient. I am the master. I am important. And if you'd like to understand how the Dor Dea could serve Avodah Zarah, it's very simple. They became rich men. I'm rich, powerful, independent. I don't need anyone. And in that sense, I deny my creator. I may not say the words, I don't accept God. I may not mouth the words. I'll still talk like a regular person. But in my heart, I've gotten rid of that whole piece. I'm independent. I don't need my creator. I'm not a servant. I'm a master. And if you'd like to see the greatest example, 40 days earlier, they heard Anochi Hashem Elokecha. They heard Hashem himself reveal himself. And in that state, they reached the highest level of prophecy. But it wasn't that long before the sense of wealth, the sense of independence, the sense of I'm rich took over. And in fact, they served the Avodah Zarah, denying Hashem on some level, whatever it is. And I believe if we take nothing else from this Rashi, just this concept, that money is one of the potential issues in life. It could be potentially the greatest bracha. It could free you up to serve your Creator, free you up to do what you're supposed to. It could be an assignment. It could be a very real temptation. And it also could be a klala, but it's all based on what you do with it. If you remain humble, if you remain dedicated to Hashem, if you now say, I'm freed up from having to work my 9 to 5, now I could learn, I could daven, I could grow, I could do what I'm supposed to do, then money is the greatest bracha. If it busies you and now preoccupies you, it's an assignment, a life test. And if in fact you get so involved in it, sunk into the materialism and into the thickness of this world, well, guess what? You're eating your world to come here, and it is one of the most dangerous nisyonos a person can have, because there are very, very few things that will lure a person away, like the sense of power, independence, the sense of I'm a rich person. And in our day and age, to be honest with you, I don't think there was ever a generation where there was so much wealth so available. I don't think there was ever a time where the average person could actually have financial independence, can actually own things, can have investments. People used to work very, very long, hard hours just to put food on the table. We're living in very different times. And while it's very blessed and potentially it's fantastic, it's also very scary, very frightening, because again, what happens is we get lured. There's a natural pull of gold. The Dordea, despite they were the ultimate kollel institution, ultimate kollel society, nevertheless Hashem put this lure of money into the heart of man, because that's the basis of the economy. That's the only way the world can exist. And you can be the holiest Jew in the world, have the greatest clarity, nevertheless money will still pull you. And it's important to recognize the Dordea and see that. But the more frightening part is the second element of it, that what being a rich person can potentially lead you to. Being rich, feeling I'm rich, I'm different, I'm better, I'm independent, I'm a superior human being, is one of the most damaging, disastrous feelings a human being can ever have. Number one, I become conceited and haughty. I become pretty difficult to live with, because if I'm above you and I look down on you, guess what? I'm not very popular. But on a much greater level, I can no longer serve my Creator. I'm independent, I'm my own boss, I don't accept anyone on top of me, and I don't accept Hashem. And as much as it potentially could be a bracha, could be an asayin, and it also could be the greatest disaster in your existence. And these two of the three cultural myths, cultural myth number one is that more money equals more happiness. We know it's not true, but nevertheless it affects us. The second cultural myth is this idea that money is who I am. My net worth is my self-worth. Is not just an illusion, but one of the most dangerous, disastrous illusions. Because when Hashem created Adam alone, one human being, and Hashem created a whole world. And what Hashem was saying to Adam Rishon was, the entire cosmos was worthy for me to create for you and you alone. And no dollar amount that you'll ever put on a human being is ever sufficient. My net worth is not 10 million or 100 million or a billion. It's planet Earth. Because Hashem says I would have created the whole world for one human being alone, and I too am a human being. And when you begin equating your self-worth with your net worth, that is cultural myth number two, and is potentially a very damaging thought. But I'd like to share with you that there's a third cultural myth. And this third cultural myth may not sound so disastrous, may not sound so damaging, but actually can be worse than the other two. And the third cultural myth is that the big spender is a rich man. Oh, he's rich. Look at the car he drives. Look at the house he's in. Oh my goodness, he's wearing a custom-made suit. He's got 10 of them. Oh my, what a rich man. And I want to share with you one of the most basic concepts. When you'll hear it, you may think I'm being foolish, but I believe you'll find it's true. And that is, when you're looking at the big spender, you're looking at the opposite of a rich man. Let me explain to you what I mean. Let's say we have two guys. One man makes $100,000 a year after taxes. The other man makes $350,000 a year after taxes. Who's rich? What's the comparison? $100,000. I mean, come on, that's, you're barely eking it out. $350,000 after taxes. I mean, you're doing okay, right? I mean, what's the comparison? And it's rather true. There's no question that $350,000 a year after taxes is a lot more money than $100,000 a year after taxes. Until you look at how much they're spending. You see, it doesn't matter how much income you have. If you're spending more than what you're earning, you're a poor man. And if our buddy who's making $350,000 a year is spending $400,000 a year, he's in abject poverty. Whereas our friend who's making $100,000 a year, if he's living on 80, and every year he puts away $20,000, before you know it, after 20 years, 30 years, he's worth well over $1 million. His net worth, his financial net worth anyway, is pretty fine. And I'd like to share with you what wealth actually means. If you would like an actual definition of wealth, wealth means I have enough money to do what I want to do. Do you understand what I'm saying? Wealth means that I'm not encumbered. I'm not forced to do things that I don't want to do. Now, if Hashem feels that I should be working 9 to 5 as a postal worker, that was my skill set, that's my life setting, that's what Hashem wants me to do. But wealth means I have enough money to choose what I want to do. I'm not forced to do, I can live the lifestyle that I want to. And if I live a very frugal lifestyle, but I'm able to accomplish great things, who knows? And the reason why I picked that particular example is because if you've ever looked at the Mishnayos Kahati, one of the greatest works in recent times. Mishnayos Kahati is, the Mishnayos was taken, translated, each Mishnah, each Masechta is a beautiful introduction that defines the whole Masechta. And each Mishnah is clearly explained. And the man who wrote that book was a postal worker. He worked in the Israeli post office. He took that job because he realized, yes, it doesn't pay a lot, but it sure does free him up to do what he wants to do. And the entire Mishnayos Kahati was written by a postal worker. One of the greatest accomplishments. And just open it up and read the introduction of any Masechta and see what the man knew, you'll understand what wealth is. And what you begin to understand is that the big spender is not the rich man. The big spender is the guy who spends a lot, but that lifestyle is very, very expensive to upkeep. And one of the great tragedies of our modern time is the amount of money we're forced to spend because it's what's done, it's what's accepted. And I used to try to go through some of the examples, and you'll excuse me for doing some, but let's assume you have an interest in cars. You're a guy, and you don't like to drive a regular car, you like to drive a luxury car. You know, turbocharged engine, comfort system, responsive handling, you know. So this is what I need. I need a Mercedes-Benz E-Series. You know, the Lamborghini is not good enough for me. The Bentley is a little too stuffy. So I've chosen the Mercedes-Benz E-Series. And listen, I mean, it's pretty impressive, right? I mean, come on, it does 0 to 60 in 5.4 seconds. Top speed of 185 miles an hour. It can take a hairpin going downhill. It's an amazing vehicle. So here's the observation. What does it cost you and what do you get out of it? So if you read the Mercedes ad, you'll get everything. Hop into the Mercedes-Benz and you'll find out what real thrill's about. Anyone who says that money doesn't buy happiness doesn't know where to shop. This vehicle will change your existence. It will change your life. When you get behind the wheel of this Mercedes-Benz E500 sedan, you are it. You are in the lap of luxury. Okay. Oddly enough, I have spent many an hour on the West Side Highway driving my Toyota Camry, which is not a Mercedes-Benz, which is not a luxury car. And I'm stuck in the same traffic next to the Bentley, next to the Jaguar, next to the Lamborghini. And here's the observation. The only difference between that vehicle and my vehicle actually isn't. And don't tell me about the handcrafted leather seats, because I don't really know the difference between leather seats and handcrafted leather seats. And my car does exactly what that car does. My car is the identical. As a matter of fact, the only thing that car does that my car doesn't do is have people go, wow, you must be a rich guy. If you could afford that car, you must be a wealthy guy. So I want to sort of debunk that little theory. When you're looking at a person who's driving that vehicle, you're not looking at a wealthy guy, you're looking at a poor guy. Because forget anything else, just the cost of that car. Because let's assume that you buy this vehicle as a new car, and you keep it. Now, you can't keep such a car for more than 2 years, 3 years at most. What does it cost you to own it? So let's take a look. You go in the Blue Book, and you see what was the value of the car when you bought it, and what does it sell for? So let's go for a moment and let's take a look at our top end. We'll go to our top end over here, the Mercedes, and we'll see. Okay, now the cost of the car actually is $253,000. So if you buy that car new, you're going to spend about $250,000. And of course, you're not going to keep it for more than 2 or 3 years. What does it cost you per year to own? Meaning if you figure involving the insurance, the depreciation, well, here's how it works out. It costs you about $15,000 a month in car payments. What that means is if you're going to pay off that car in 2 years, you're going to be paying $15,000 a month in that car. And what that means in plain language is that car, as it sits in your driveway, is a literal financial time bomb because it's ticking away. Because the minute you drive it outside of the showroom and you just parked yourself in this brand new vehicle, it just devalued by $20,000, $25,000 or more. And every day that you're keeping it, because its value is less and less. Who wants a used Mercedes? Who wants a 2-year-old BMW? Come on, the Lamborghini's already 3 years. Forget, it's worthless. And even though it's true, it will trade, but nowhere near its value. And the cost of owning that vehicle is so extraordinary that it's beyond belief. It's not going to cost you $1,000 a month. It's not going to deplete your bank account by $2,000 a month. We're talking $15,000 a month every month. If you have a very expensive home and you're paying $5,000 a month in mortgages, you're paying way too much money. Three of them for the opportunity to drive this vehicle. And when you're looking at it, you're looking at insanity. But we become so enamored with this concept that the big spender is the rich man when it's exactly the opposite. And I'd like to give you a mushal because I don't think most people, certainly not young people, understand this. I want you to imagine that someone comes to your house late at night. He's a mashulach from Eretz Yisrael, and you notice he's a little different because he's, I don't know, something about him. And he asks if you can give him a donation, you write a large check, and then he asks you, could you help him show him the people in the neighborhood? And there's something about him that takes you, and you say, yes, absolutely. You get in your car and you drive him to one house, you drive him to the second house, and you notice there's something very unusual. He just seems to know so much. As he's about to go into his neighbor's house, he says, "Oi, I hope the child becomes well." How did he know that neighbor had a sick child? He comes about to go into another's house, says, "Mazel tov, the shidduch should go well." How did he know they had a daughter going out? And before you know it, there's something very unusual. And before you realize it, this man is it. The real McCoy, a real McCubble. Oh my goodness. And after driving him the whole night, he looks at you and says, "Now, because of what you've done for me, and because you are such a good person, I want to give you the secret. I want to share with you the secret to wealth. There is a secret, and once you know the secret, you'll understand how to amass wealth." Yes, tell me the secret. What is the secret to wealth? The secret to wealth is spend less than you earn. And he gets out of the car. Spend less than you earn. That's what I need a makubal for. That's what I need a great chacham for. Spend less than you earn. That's not the way you become wealthy. You buy a big company. You build your company. You go public. That's how you become wealthy. And the great secret to wealth is that no one becomes wealthy that way. It's a pipe dream. Because if your dream of becoming wealthy is building your company more and more and more, well, guess what? Your lifestyle builds with it. You spend more. And as long as you keep spending more and spending more, spending more, you never acquire wealth. If your goal in life is to acquire wealth, and hopefully it's to acquire wealth so you could buy freedom, so you could do what you're supposed to, so you could dedicate to serve Hashem properly, the way you buy wealth is by spending less. By spending less than you earn, you put away money, and suddenly, all of a sudden, there's more, there's excess, and suddenly you have the freedom of choice. You don't have to do this, and you don't have to spend big bucks, and suddenly you're a free person. I think what this Chazal shares with us, what this Rashi shares with us, is that money is a very, very confusing sort of entity. It could be the greatest bracha in the world. It could free you up to actually serve Hashem, to accomplish, to really do what you're put here. It could also be a major Nisayan, and it could also be a klala. The Dardea, the greatest generation who ever lived, were so afflicted that Hashem said, "I'm going to destroy them. They're no longer worthy of being the chosen nation." And it took Moshe Rabbeinu interceding. But what did Moshe Rabbeinu say? Ata garamt, Hashem, you caused it. You gave them wealth. You gave them riches. And you know what it's like? It's like the king took his son, bathed him, adorned him, put a gold purse on his neck, put him on the house, the Pesach Bezos owners, the house of ill repute. How is it possible the son won't sin? Hashem, you gave them wealth, they're going to sin. What does Rashi mean? What Rashi's telling us is that wealth is a major nisayon. Everyone says, if I had money, don't worry, I wouldn't be like him. And that guy gets money and he becomes just like him. And there are many, many people who withstand many, many life tests. But wealth is not one of them that many people succeed. In my lifetime, I've met one or two people who actually succeeded in having wealth and not letting it destroy them. But that means that many, many people. The vast majority of people get a little bit of money. Whoo, I'm the rich man, better than you, above you, and no longer interested in serving Hashem, no longer interested in growing, no longer interested in doing what I was put here to do. And this is one of the greatest examples. The Dordei, even though they had nothing to do with their money, even though they were in the midbar, the ultimate kollel environment, and nevertheless, it was such a temptation because that's the natural pull of gold, and it led them to the sense of independence. I'm the rich man, and I think it's one of the greatest illustrations of the danger. Money could be potentially a bracha, but it has to be very carefully guarded, very carefully used. And I want to close with one last observation. The Chavetz Chaim was once in his house, pulled out a sefer from his Svarim collection, and said, "Oi, why did I buy this sefer? Should never have bought the sefer." And it looked a little curious because why was the Chavetz Chaim lamenting having bought a sefer? And he explained, "I don't think I even learned the sefer. I don't even think I opened it, but I spent money to buy it. I spent money to buy it, and I didn't even use it." And what the Chavetz Chaim was saying was a very eye-opening concept. Money is the most expensive commodity that you will ever acquire. The only way we acquire money is with our most valuable resource, and that's time. Because unless you're granted wealth from Shemayim, unless you're granted the uncle in Utah who dies and leaves you $100 million, if you're the average person, you're going to work for your money. The greatest resource that we have is time. And every dollar that we earn is earned with our greatest resource called time. Every dollar represents a certain amount of time. And before you spend a dollar, the question you should ask yourself is this a good investment of my life? All my life is just some time. If I'm 40 and I hope to live to 80, I have 40 years left. That means how many hours, how many weeks, how many months? And I've bought this money with some of my time, my single greatest resource. How am I investing this time of mine? When the Chavetz Chaim pulled out that sefer, he realized he didn't even learn it. But that money that he used to trade for that sefer cost him time, and it was a bad investment. When you understand life properly, you understand the most precious commodity we have is this short thing called time. With this thing called time, we buy things. We buy the world to come, we buy chesed, we buy serving Hashem, or we buy money. Money is an important commodity, and it's very needed. But when you buy money with time, you have to spend it very, very judiciously because you're spending your life, you're spending the greatest commodity you have. May Hashem grant us the wisdom and understanding to realize this and to use money as we should to serve Hashem properly.